Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Your enemy's enemy is your friend, they say. But what is your enemy's friend? Is it your enemy? Can it be your friend? This is the question India is grappling with. China is Russia's friend, especially in the face-off against the West. The China-Russia axis is growing stronger. They're holding military drills. They're deepening their economic partnership. Where does that leave India? India depends on Russia for weapons. It is also buying a lot of Russian oil. So far, it has been able to balance the threat from China with its reliance on Russia. Countries dehyphenate relationships all the time. It happens everywhere in the world. But as the going gets tough for all sides, will Russia have to choose? And if it does, will it choose China over India? On Gravitas tonight, we examine what Moscow and Beijing call their partnership with no limits and its implications on India and the world. Russia and China were partners. Are Western actions and sanctions turning them into allies? They're conducting military drills, they're integrating their economies, and they're pushing back against the West together. What does it mean for the world and for India? In our cover story tonight, we'll discuss the Russia-China axis, or what they call their no-limits partnership. We'll begin with the military drills. Moscow is hosting International Army Games next month, and China's PLA, or People's Liberation Army, is participating. In fact, they've already sent a delegation. Chinese tanks and military vehicles are on their way to Russia's Far East. China has been participating in this event since 2015. So why is this edition making headlines? Because this time Russia is at war and China is threatening one. This edition is a show of strength. The Kremlin is telling the world that it's not isolated and that the war in Ukraine has not weakened its forces. A lot of this is thanks to China. It hasn't supported Russia's military campaign directly, but Chinese companies have been supporting the Russian military. They've been supplying microchips, electronic components, and some raw materials. This includes aluminium oxide. Aluminium oxide, it's a chemical compound. It is used to extract the metal aluminium, and it's widely used in weapon production. Russian imports of Chinese aluminium oxide have jumped by 400 times. What about chip imports? They've doubled in the first 5 months of 2022. All of these have clear and distinct military applications. So in a way, China is helping Russia's fight in Ukraine, and that is America's assessment too. Last month, the US sanctioned 5 Chinese companies. They were accused of supporting the Russian military. And military support is just one part of this China-Russia relationship. The second aspect is the economic partnership. The West has largely snapped economic ties with Russia, so Moscow has turned to China. Beijing is interested in Russian energy supplies. It is already among the largest buyers of Russian oil, and now China wants to buy Russian gas too. China and Russia are expanding a gas pipeline. This project, in fact, began 8 years back. Some parts of it are operational, but the project as a whole has not really taken off. Russia invested $55 billion in this gas pipeline, in this pipeline deal. But Chinese purchases have been minuscule so far. Since December 2019, China has imported just $3.81 billion worth of gas from Russia. But that is about to change. Like I said, China and Russia are extending this gas pipeline. When it's ready, Russia will be able to export gas from Siberia and China will be able to receive the supply all the way in Shanghai. It's a win-win for both sides. Russia will have a new customer for its gas. Earlier it was Europe, now it will be China. And for China, it will ensure a steady source of energy. Russia is already China's largest source of energy imports. Now it's about to get bigger. What does all of this tell you? The China-Russia axis is gaining strength with strong military and economic ties. What does this mean for the West? They're failing in their quest to make Putin a pariah. He's building a parallel sphere of influence. What about India? How should India see this growing partnership? India should be worried because this is not a partnership of equals. There was a time when Russia was the senior partner, but now it's not. Today, Moscow needs Beijing more, and Moscow's dependence on Beijing will have a bearing sooner or later on its partnership with India. India has bought large consignments of Russian oil, but the progress on defense supplies has been slow. This is an important pillar of the India-Russia relationship, and it is showing signs of strain. India has signed major defense deals with Russia, but Moscow is yet to come through on some of those commitments, like the delivery of the S-400. India was expecting the delivery of the second squadron in May. It has been delayed by at least 3 months. A joint venture to manufacture rifles in India is also facing delays. The pact was signed last year. The plan was to make more than 600,000 AK-203 rifles in India, but the agreement is yet to be operationalized. Some other deals have also been deferred, like the purchase of MiG-29 fighters and the upgrade of an existing fleet of MiG-29 jets. And all of this is happening at a time when India wants to firm up its defenses against an aggressive China. India's biggest military threat today comes from Russia's biggest partner. And India's biggest source of weapons is still Russia. And that makes New Delhi's position less than ideal. What happens if Moscow has to choose between India and China? The past does not inspire confidence. Let me take you back to 1962. China was about to attack India. Beijing sounded out Moscow. Nikita Khrushchev, the then Soviet leader, leaned towards China. He is believed to have given a quote-unquote a wink and a nod to the Chinese. India was expecting a delivery of MiG fighters from the USSR. It was then the USSR. This delivery was delayed. And I know the world has changed since 1962. Equations have changed. India's position has changed. But the rules of international politics have not changed. You always secure your interests first. Russia would do the same, as would India. So will history repeat itself? Guess we'll have to wait and see. But coming back to the West's prophecies for Russia, all the predictions about isolation and economic gloom and doom, see how they're playing out.
Russia is predicted to have a very sharp recession in 2022. Now we are predicting negative 6% for 2022. Before we were predicting negative 8.5%. So that's the upward revision. But it's still fairly sizable recession in Russia in 2022. The European economy, we're reducing down the growth levels to about 2.6%, but it's still positive.
You just heard the IMF's chief economist. He says the Russian economy is doing better than expected. What was expected? A collapse of the Russian system. At least that's what the West had expected. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, the West has been slapping sanctions. This week, for example, began with the headline, Britain targets Russian officials in new wave of sanctions. Russia's officials have been targeted. Banks have been targeted. Brands have been targeted. Financial institutions have been targeted. Trade has been targeted. Basically, everything Russian has been sanctioned by the West. And what's the end result? Here's what else the IMF chief economist said, and I'm quoting. The Russian central bank and the Russian policymakers have been able to stave off a banking panic or financial meltdown when the sanctions were first imposed. He also said that the rising energy prices are, quote-unquote, providing an enormous amount of revenues to the Russian economy. What about the West? The countries that slapped sanctions on Russia, how are they faring? Europe is bearing the brunt of the energy war. Look at Germany. On the 22nd of February this year, Germany suspended the certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. This move was supposed to hurt Russia. Today is the 27th of July 2022 and Germany is in the middle of an energy crisis. By the end of this week, their energy supply will drop to 20%. Moscow says it's all because of technical reasons, but the world knows that Putin is pulling the strings. He is punishing the EU's biggest economy. European sanctions have basically boomeranged. The 27 EU states are scrambling to fill their gas storage. Case study number 2, the United Kingdom. On the 22nd of February, the UK froze assets of 5 Russian banks. Again, it is the 27th of July today. The IMF is upgrading Russia's GDP estimate by 2.5 percentage points. What about the UK? Its inflation has hit a 40-year high and it faces a 50-50 chance of recession. And I'm not saying that the Russian economy has not been affected at all. Russia has taken a hit, no two ways about it. Its economy is going to contract by at least 6%. But for the West, it will be a Pyrrhic victory, if you can call it a victory at all. The UK, for example, is expected to grow by 0.5% in 2023. This too is from the IMF forecast. Moral of the story, sanctions don't work. And we told you this a long time ago. What's the point of these sanctions or of forcing a country to default on its debt when creditors know very well that the default is artificially orchestrated? Today, energy prices are shooting through the roof thanks to the Western sanctions. As for Russia, it is neither badly affected nor isolated. You heard what the IMF had to say. Now look at where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has been jet-setting. He is on a tour of Africa. So far, he's visited Egypt, Congo and Uganda. Next stop, Ethiopia. In Congo, Lavrov defended the war. He blamed the West for the rising prices and said there are no barriers to Ukraine's grain exports.
Unbiased experts also confirmed what we have said since the very beginning. The grain terminal of Odessa port is located at a considerable distance from the military part. There are no obstacles to starting deliveries of grain to customers in line with the deal signed, and we have not created any obstacles.
In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni told Lavrov that he saw no reason to criticize the Russian war. Do you see what they're trying to do here? This tour of Africa is Russia's way of diversifying its diplomacy, of looking away from the West. It is geostrategic posturing. Russia accounts for less than 1% of foreign direct investment in Africa. This continent has by and large been a battlefield between the West and Asia and China, in fact. Africa has also refused to be party to Western sanctions, much like Asia. African countries have not joined the West in slamming Russia. Remember, 17 African nations abstained on a UN resolution against Russia's war. They see the futility of sanctions. And Russia sees another opportunity to counter the West. So basically, Russia has survived the impact of sanctions and the Russian economy is still afloat. China, on the other hand, is struggling. Chinese banks have frozen deposits. Local governments are broke, and China is unable to shake off the latest wave of Wuhan virus cases. In fact, the Wuhan virus is now back in Wuhan, the original epicenter of the pandemic. It's reporting a fresh outbreak. How many cases? Just 4 so far. And all the patients are asymptomatic. The outbreak is limited to just one district. That is what China claims. But in typical fashion, China has ordered everyone to stay at home. We're talking about 1 million citizens under lockdown in Wuhan. 1 million. They're not allowed to move around anymore. Large group events have been banned. Dining at restaurants also banned. Entertainment venues and markets closed. Bus and subway services suspended. China's zero COVID protocol is kicking in Wuhan. The people are afraid of what could follow. The present lockdown is nothing like 2020. Back then, 11 million people were under lockdown in Wuhan. This time, around 970,000. But the people of Wuhan fear that this is just the beginning and that Beijing will widen these restrictions. In 2020, the people of Wuhan lived through their worst nightmare. The Chinese state botched up its response. First, it ignored the outbreak. Then it silenced the whistleblowers. Finally, when the cases began to grow, China attempted a cover-up. By then, it was too late. The Wuhan virus had spread across mainland China, and from there, it springboarded to the rest of the world. By August 2020, almost the entire world was struggling with the Wuhan virus. What about Wuhan? Well, the city came out of the lockdown, and almost immediately the residents were out and about. They were partying. You might remember these pictures. Thousands of people in an open-air water park. There were no masks or social distancing. The Chinese state was pulling off the mother of all spins here. It claimed victory over the Wuhan virus. 2 years later, they're back to where they started. Wuhan is under lockdown again, and the Chinese state is unable to tame this homegrown virus. Beijing also tried to evade responsibility for the spread. Remember, China insists that the pandemic did not begin in Wuhan, but the world sees it as the epicenter. And despite China's best efforts, more evidence keeps coming out. 2 new studies have been published. They confirm what many have suspected. The Wuhan wet market was the launch pad for the virus. These are 2 new studies. Let me tell you what they found. These scientists studied the initial cases linked to the wet market. This is the Huanan seafood market. China had immediately shut it down when the first cases were reported. This happened in December 2019. The scientists looked into these early cases and their findings are very interesting. They say the virus jumped from animals to humans. There are at least 2 separate transmission events. They could have happened in November 2019. Let me show you a map. This is the city of Wuhan. The dots here represent the patients who tested positive in December 2019. Now, do you see the cluster of cases in the middle? That's where the Huanan wet market is. Most of the cases detected in the early days were found near the market. Did they come from a lab and spread in the market? Or did they originate in the market? If you ask China, none of the above. It denies that the pandemic even began in Wuhan. The world, though, knows otherwise, and the proof is piling up. Our next story tonight comes from Germany. The country's flag carrier is in a fix, Lufthansa. It has been forced to cancel 1,000 flights because ground staff is on strike. Workers have walked out of their jobs. They want the airline to raise their salaries. This strike has hit travel plans of over 134,000 people. Flights in at least 9 German cities are running late or not running at all. What is Lufthansa doing to resolve this, and why are most airlines in Europe in a similar kind of mess? Here's a report.
1,000 flights scrapped. 134,000 passengers hit. Hours-long queues at airports. Frustrated clients.
The problem, no, I cannot travel. I arrived from Africa now.
And an airline in a fix.
It's really a bitter day for the airline, but especially for the people who wanted to have a vacation.
This is the state of Deutsche Lufthansa, the flag carrier of the German Republic, and the second largest airline in Europe. It's facing a rebellion from its own staff. They've gone on strike over low wages. It's just a one-day walkout, but the fallout is severe. Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin, Cologne, Düsseldorf, Hamburg, Hanover and Stuttgart, Lufthansa flights at all these airports are either running late or not running at all.
Yes, we unfortunately had to cancel over 1,000 flights in Frankfurt and Munich because of this massive strike by the union. This means that well over 100,000 people can't take their vacation as they had actually intended to do.
How many workers are on strike and what do they want? This walkout has been staged by the Verdi union. It's made up of 20,000 Lufthansa ground staff. The union says it wants a 9.5% pay hike for them. That's about 350 euros or $360 a month. It also wants a minimum hourly wage of 13 euros. So how much is Lufthansa willing to offer? A scanty 7.6%. What's their excuse? It says it has already given its staff enough hikes, a claim the union vehemently denies.
We made an offer which in my view is very good. It reflects the fact that people in lower income jobs are especially affected by inflation, which is why we offered roughly 15% more in wages for lower income jobs.
The last offer Lufthansa made was not sufficient to avert the strike. Lufthansa also did not improve its offer in recent days, and so the employees see the necessity to go on strike today.
Dann sind Streiks auch nicht ausgeschlossen.
So what does this deadlock mean for passengers in Europe? More queues, more disruption, more cancelled flights. In the last 2 months, many airlines have faced such challenges, leaving passengers stranded. On June 27th, Norwegian Airlines had to cancel 230 flights after its staff walked out. On July the 1st, French airport workers went on a strike. On July 4th, 1,000 pilots of the Scandinavian airline went on strike. And on July 19th, refuelers at UK's Heathrow Airport staged a walkout. It's been a summer of discontent for European carriers, triggered partly by the post-COVID travel rush and partly because of internal labour unrest. How long will this crisis persist? As long as their staff wants.
Our next story is from Pakistan. The country has turned into a circus. And I'm not the one saying this, a former Pakistani Prime Minister is. His name is Nawaz Sharif. He released a statement on Tuesday. Allow me to quote. Pakistan has turned into a circus. Salute to the 3 Supreme Court judges. This is Nawaz Sharif. What was he referring to? The political tug-of-war in the Punjab province. Imran Khan has won this round. His party, the PTI, has won in court. Nawaz Sharif's party, the PMLN, lost. The Sharifs are calling it a judicial coup. They're accusing the Supreme Court of Pakistan of favouring their ladla. That's what Maryam Nawaz said. She said, the judiciary has ruled in the favour of its ladla or darling, Imran Khan. Now, let me give you some context here. The Punjab province was supposed to elect its chief minister. The assembly held a vote for this. Imran Khan's allies won that vote, but they could not appoint a CM, thanks to the deputy speaker. He annulled 10 of their votes. And then he ruled in favour of the PMLN, that is Nawaz Sharif's party. He made their candidate the chief minister, even though they lost the election. The PTI, which is Imran Khan's party, approached the Supreme Court. It filed a petition to overturn the deputy speaker's decision. And the Supreme Court of Pakistan ruled in favour of the PTI. So Imran Khan's ally, Chaudhry Parvez Ilahi, is now the chief minister of Punjab. Here's what the court said. The governance of the province of Punjab has been subverted. The fundamental rights of the people have been seriously infringed. Therefore, the deputy speaker's ruling is set aside and declared to be void. Hours after this order, there was an oath-taking ceremony. Parvez Ilahi was sworn in. Hamza Shehbaz was dethroned. Minutes after that, there were celebrations in PTI offices. And you have to give it to Nawaz Sharif. It did look like a circus. There was a carnival on the streets too. In Lahore, PTI workers gathered by the thousands, waving flags, chanting slogans and performing stunts. Watch this now. As the PTI celebrated all night, the PMLN was busy brainstorming, taking stock of what had happened. The next morning, they came up with another political threat, a warning to impose governor's rule in Punjab. Why? Simply because they can. After all, this is the party in power in Islamabad. Listen to Pakistan's Interior Minister.
जिस किस्म की गुफ्तगू कल शाम से की जा रही है और बाज़ जो आवारा किस्म की गुफ्तगू करने के आदी हैं वो जिस किस्म की गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं कि जी हम फ़लाँ पे पाबंदी लगा देंगे फ़लाँ पे ये कर देंगे, अगर उन्होंने कोई ऐसी हरकत की तो मेरा उनको ये पैगाम है कि गवर्नर राज की समरी जो है वो वजारत दाखिला ने पेश करनी है और मैंने उसके ऊपर काम शुरू कर दिया.
How did the PTI respond to this threat? It chose Fawad Chaudhry to hit back. Mr. Gift of the Gab called PMLN leaders politically broke and mentally challenged.
राना सनाउल्लाह का और जो मरियम औरंगजेब का और कुछ और लोगों का जो सियासी तौर के ऊपर बिल्कुल पैदल लोग हैं. अब आप देखिए कि ये लोग जो ज़्यादातर लोग हैं जो गैर सियासी लोग हैं जिनमें अकल नहीं है. राना सनाउल्लाह की अभी की आप प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस देखें, शर्म आती है कि इस तरह के लोग पाकिस्तान के इतने बड़े ओहदों के ऊपर हैं. कि आप कल सुप्रीम कोर्ट का एक हुक्म आया है, उस पर अमल दरामद हुआ है और आज आप कह रहे हैं कि आप गवर्नर रूल लगा देंगे। आपने अपने लॉ मिनिस्टर से सिर्फ ये कर लें कि जो गवर्नर रूल की जो हमारी शिक है उसको पढ़ लें, ताकि आपको पता चल जाए कि गवर्नर रूल किन हालात में लगता है। आपकी अपनी तो इज्जत नहीं है और आप एक बोंगियां मार रहे हैं, लेकिन आप इसको पढ़ लें ताकि आपको कम से कम जब बात करें तो समझ हो कि आप बात क्या कर रहे हैं।
So what happens next? Will the Punjab province come under governor's rule? If the PMLN has its way, it might. Expect another deadlock there. Meanwhile, calls for early elections are growing louder. Pakistan, we know, will go to polls next year. That's when elections are scheduled to take place. But the PTI wants those dates to be advanced. Its leaders want elections to be held as early as October this year. Why do they want early polls? So that they can make the most of the momentum they've got in Punjab. The PMLN, meanwhile, is busy pushing another campaign. They want Nawaz Sharif back in Pakistan. They say only Sharif's return can save the country from the ongoing crises, both political and economic. So will the disgraced leader return? We've been hearing this for months now. His party keeps saying he's coming back. But we know they need to ensure legal immunity for him before he makes a move. For now, we'll shift our attention to Congo. Yesterday, we received some disturbing news. 2 Indian peacekeepers were killed in action in Congo. They were part of a UN peacekeeping mission. And to understand what happened there, we must know what's going on in Congo. Violent protests have been on for 2 days. Locals have been protesting against the United Nations. This is happening in Congo's North Kivu province. Yesterday, the UN base there came under attack. The exact details are not out, but reports say the protesters approached some Congolese security personnel. They were near the UN base. They were close to the peacekeepers. The protesters they were violent. They snatched weapons from the security personnel and they shot at peacekeeping forces at point-blank range. Some local media reports say the protesters were shot at by peacekeepers, but we cannot independently confirm any of these versions. What we can tell you is that 2 Indian peacekeepers died in this attack. They were deputed from India's border security force of BSF. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has demanded an investigation into what happened. I have a statement with me. This is what he said. Deeply grieved at the loss of lives of 2 valiant Indian peacekeepers of the BSF in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The perpetrators of these outrageous attacks must be held accountable and brought to justice. I know what some of you are thinking. What are Indian forces doing in Congo in the first place? They're part of something called MONUSCO. It's a French acronym for the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in Congo. This is basically a UN peacekeeping force, and India plays a key role in it. Why does Congo need a peacekeeping force? Because it is a volatile country, especially in the conflict-torn eastern region. More than 120 armed groups have an active presence there. Civilian massacres are common in East Congo. Millions of people have been displaced due to the violence. In recent months, the clashes have intensified. One group is being blamed for killing civilians, the M23 rebels. In the past month, they've killed at least 29 civilians. The M23 rebels have been fighting the Congolese troops too. They have taken control of some parts of eastern Congo. The renewed fighting has displaced more than 170,000 people. The locals now blame the UN peacekeepers for what's happening. They say they've been ineffective in containing the violence. How many peacekeepers are there in Congo? More than 17,000. India is the second largest troop contributor to this mission. There are about 2,000 Indian personnel in Congo right now. And this is not the first Indian deployment to the country. Congo has seen multiple UN peacekeeping missions, and Indian troops have been deployed there since 1960. Till date, India has lost 53 soldiers in Congo. In May this year, the United Nations even praised the contribution of Indian peacekeepers. The rebels have stepped up their attacks on civilians, and the Indian troops have played a proactive role in defending Congo, especially against the M23 rebels. So what is the UN saying about the recent attacks? It wants Congo to investigate. It says these attacks can be treated as war crimes. What does it say about the claims of shooting by peacekeepers? The United Nations says the peacekeepers have exercised restraint.
Obviously, if there's any if there's any responsibility by UN forces for any of the injuries or any of the deaths, we will follow up on that. But yes, we do first need to get to the truth of what's happening on the ground. No, as far as I'm aware, all peacekeepers have been instructed to exercise the utmost restraint. As I believe we reported yesterday, when there were similar incidents at our bases, they were able to use tear gas and to fire into the air. But obviously, the situation on the ground has changed as some of these compounds have been breached. I don't know whether that materially changed the response.
The United Nations needs to respond quickly. The situation is getting out of hand. The protesters broke into the headquarters of the UN peacekeeping mission. Reports say they smashed windows and looted valuables. Helicopters airlifted some of the UN officials. This is a developing story. We'll keep track. And you know what Congo famous for? It's paintings, hand-woven baskets, African carvings, and you don't have to go to Congo to get your hands on these. You can find them online, except there is no guarantee that they will be genuine. For the longest time, we leaned on reviews. They doubled up as certificates of authenticity. That's until their own authenticity came under the scanner. Fake reviews are today's reality. The World Economic Forum says 4% of all online reviews could be fake. These reviews get people to spend up to $152 billion every year. That's how big the fake review industry is. I don't know how many of you have been victims of fake reviews, but if you have, do write to us and share your experience. For now, we have some news to share with you. India has decided to fight fake reviews. A plan is being drawn up, and leading this campaign is India's Department of Consumer Affairs. It has already held a series of meetings, held talks with all stakeholders, dived deep into the problem of fake reviews, and now it plans to come up with a solution. The details have not been revealed, but given the magnitude of the fake review problem, any step in this direction is welcome. I say this because today reviews equal to goodwill, and this is a problem because today goodwill can be faked. 95% of online shoppers read reviews before deciding to make a purchase. 76% of consumers trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations. 92% of consumers hesitate to buy when there are no reviews available. What do we buy online? Everything from books to bags, holidays to hotels, food to fast fashion. We even buy educational courses online. Today, everything is subject to fake reviews. In 2021, online reviews influenced $3.8 trillion of global e-commerce. A restaurant can bump up its ratings using fake reviews. A hotel can use fake reviews to get more bookings. A gaming app can use fake reviews to attract gaming geeks. No matter who you are, what your interests are, and what is in your shopping cart, as long as you're making a purchase online, fake reviews are your problem too. You know what else is a problem? Tracing fake reviews. And since we are yet to get details of India's plans, I will not comment on it. But tracing fake reviews in general can be an impossible task. Take your Instagram influencers, for example. What are their feeds? If not a series of fake reviews, if I may. These influencers vouch for one product one day, another the next day. How do you stop them? What about reviewers who claim to be genuine buyers? Those engaged in this business are a step ahead. Say a website has regulations in place that allows only verified buyers to drop a review. Then what brands do is ask people to buy a product, get them to drop a fake review, and once that review is posted, the brands refund the money to the fake reviewer. To get the business model, it happens. How do you cut through this web of deceit? Governments will have to keep all of these complications in mind when they come up with a plan to combat this disinformation racket. Because businesses won't stop. And there's no reason for them to. An extra star on a restaurant's Yelp rating can bump up its revenue by 5 to 9%. What drives these ratings? Reviews. Businesses who cannot genuinely make it to 5-star often choose to fake it. Do platforms check fake reviews? Many of them have been forced to. Amazon, for instance, spent over $500 million. It hired some 8,000 people. Their job is to tackle fake reviews. But have they been successful? Only to an extent. Facebook claims to have cracked down on groups that ask people to drop fake reviews, but Facebook's report card does not look great either. Over the years, several countries have tried fighting fake reviews. They have come up with laws. The United Kingdom has. So have Italy and Spain. But these laws have not really served their purpose. As recently as January this year, the European Commission found that 2/3 of online shops have doubtful reviews. What about India? TripAdvisor says India is the country most likely to create paid reviews. India is now developing a framework to address this problem, and we wish it nothing but the best. And here's a reminder. Next week, debris from a Chinese rocket is expected to crash on Earth. No one knows where exactly. The debris belongs to the Long March 5B rocket, a Chinese rocket launched on the 24th of July. It was left in uncontrolled orbit. The rocket's booster stage is now headed back. You know what's worse? This is happening for the third time. Chinese rockets, or parts of them, have crashed back on Earth at least twice before, once in 2020, then again in 2021. Why is China being so irresponsible? And what consequences could its actions have? Here's a report.
2、1，点火！点火！
It took off in glory. It's returning in pieces. China's rogue rocket, the Long March 5B, is headed back to Earth. On the 24th of July, the rocket was launched in style from the Hainan province. It was carrying a module for the Tiangong space station. Once the job was done, China left the rocket's booster stage in uncontrolled orbit, instead of making a controlled descent to Earth. The huge booster is now headed back, disoriented and disintegrated. How much does it weigh? 20 tons. Where will it crash? No one knows. The object will break apart as it enters the atmosphere. The debris could be scattered all over Earth. According to the Aerospace Corporation, the possible crash sites could be in the US, Brazil, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Australia. And how severe will the impact be? It's difficult to assess, but experts say the crash won't pose a risk to people, and yet it's a matter of concern. You see, this is the third time China has done this, left a rocket in uncontrolled orbit. In 2020, the first Long March 5B rocket crashed in West Africa. The debris caused damage but no injuries. In 2021, debris from the second Long March 5B rocket crashed in the Indian Ocean. It splashed harmlessly in the waters, but sent diplomatic shockwaves. Now, debris from a third Chinese rocket is headed towards Earth. Scientists the world over have had enough. They're lambasting China for failing to meet safety standards. Also for violating international regulations on space debris. China is calling their complaints hype, and the media reports fabricated.
The report you mentioned is a political lie fabricated by a few Republican lawmakers who harbor ill intentions towards China. This has no factual basis. It seems that some American politicians have a China phobia and a persecution mania.
China may be downplaying the fears, but its track record doesn't help. In November 2021, the ISS was forced to perform a maneuver to avoid collision with debris from a defunct Chinese satellite which Beijing had destroyed. Then in March 2022, a leftover piece of a rocket created a 65 feet wide crater on the moon. Had this piece hit the International Space Station, the consequences would have been disastrous. Scientists pointed fingers at China. Beijing shrugged off all responsibility. So what can be done to fix this? Nothing much, besides praying that Chinese debris doesn't land on our homes.
And before I move on to the final story for the evening, I want you to pause for a couple of seconds. I want you to pay attention to what you hear around you. What do we hear? Noise, I'm guessing. Honking cars, blasting music, age-old generators, pinging phones, barking dogs, maybe a siren in the distance, perhaps even construction work. Do you know, today our world is noisier than it's ever been before. If you're living in a city, then you're being exposed to noise above 85 decibels on a regular basis. 85 decibels for more than 8 hours is hazardous. You must have read about noise pollution in school. All of us did. Today we are living this problem and living it every day. Your lawnmower? Did you know it could be as loud as 90 decibels? A subway train is anything between 90 to 115 decibels. We are exposed to these sources of noise on a daily basis and we have normalized it. Silence, on the other hand, has become uncomfortable. Some, though, go places in the quest for silence. Some even go underwater. Scuba diving is being promoted as one of the few experiences left in the world where you can still hear your breath, where you can feel your heartbeat. Some go to the hills in the quest for quiet in this loud world. The more isolated the cabin, the farther from the madding crowd, the more likely it is to be high-priced. A whole industry has sprung up to profit from our noisy world. You must have heard of noise-cancelling headphones. Their worldwide sales are currently worth over $5 billion. By 2032, that number is expected to cross $9 billion. Noise cancellation headphones. But do these devices address the real problem, the problem of noise? Today, our cities are just too loud. India's Moradabad is the world's second loudest city. Dhaka tops the chart. Islamabad is number 3. Also on this list are Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City, Bangkok, New York. Noise pollution is not a third world problem, just in case you happen to have assumed that. Noise pollution is a global problem. And here's why you should care. Exposure to loud noise can cause high blood pressure, heart diseases, also affect your sleep. Children who live near airports or noisy streets are more likely to suffer from stress, low attention levels. Noise, you see, impairs memory. It also affects a child's reading skills. In New York, 90% of mass transit users are exposed to loud noise on a daily basis. In Ho Chi Minh City, even cyclists are exposed to noise levels above 78 decibels. This, the United Nations says, can cause irreversible hearing loss. Like I mentioned before, today we are living the problem of noise pollution. We are living it. So back to the basics. Why, in fact, is our world so noisy? Because of industrialization, growing population, growing traffic, growing activity on phones, basically all the changes that made the 21st century contribute to noise. On a metaphorical level, today, loudness seems to have become a virtue, a display of leadership even. People like to dominate a meeting. The more loudly one speaks, the more likely he or she is to make their point. There are approximately 55 billion meetings a day in the United States alone. It's a constant battle for attention, and studies don't make a case for the loudest being the brightest. The battle for attention continues outside too. On the road, for example, ambulances, they have to install louder sirens because traffic has become louder. As for fire engines, their sirens have become 6 times louder in the last 100 years. Is this noise desirable? In Europe alone, 10,000 people die prematurely every year because of noise. Death by noise is real. Be it the death of human beings, the death of information, opinion, or productivity. So we say let's tune out to tune in. And that could be today's hashtag, Wednesday Wisdom. Wrapping up with that, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
India's global